Nick returned to Capri with a mission. Not just a vacation, not nostalgia. This was a campaign, direct, unapologetic, and fueled by obsession. In his hand, he carried the ring, the one he had once imagined sliding onto Brooke's finger long ago. The sea breeze, the Italian sun, the familiar stone paths of the island, they were all pieces of a dream he was determined to reclaim. Brooke Logan. She was the goal, and he wasn't going home without making his move. But Capri wasn't just a romantic backdrop this time. It was a stage. And lurking in the wings was Eric Forrester, who saw it coming before anyone else. He looked at Nick's return not with hope, but with warning. That man brings nothing but storm clouds, Eric had told Ridge, his voice low but firm. If he's here for Brooke, he won't care who gets destroyed in the process. Nick didn't care. His entire focus was Brooke. He followed her, gently, persistently. Walking alongside her as they strolled along the cliffs, evoking old memories, bringing up the past not with regret but with promise. He spoke of second chances, of how time hadn't dulled what they had, but clarified it. And then, at the edge of the cliff where they had once shared sunsets and whispered dreams, he reached into his pocket. The box opened. The ring sparkled. Brooke's eyes widened. But before he could drop to one knee, before the question could even leave his lips, the world shifted. Literally. Brooke stepped backward, losing her footing. The edge gave out. A scream tore through the air, and she went over. The sea below was merciless. Sharp rocks. A long drop. Cold, dangerous waves. But she never hit them alone. Because Ridge had been running. He had heard enough. Heard whispers, rumors, that Nick was planning something reckless. And Ridge, despite everything, despite his engagement to Taylor, despite the years of heartbreak and rebuilding, couldn't stay away. Not when it came to Brooke. Not when Nick Marone was involved. He ran, fast, furious, desperate to stop whatever was happening. And when he saw Brooke fall, instinct took over. He didn't think. He dove. The splash echoed across the coastline. Moments later, Ridge surfaced, pulling Brooke with him. She was coughing, dazed, trembling in his arms. But she was alive. Because he saved her. And, just like that, everything changed. The press was all over it. Photos of Ridge cradling Brooke on the beach went viral. The Forrester jet was called in. The world watched. But the real explosion wasn't on the internet, it was back home, inside the hearts of the people closest to them. Taylor. She had spent months rebuilding trust. Carefully stitching her relationship with Ridge back together, trying to believe that Brooke was finally out of the picture. She had the ring. She had the future. But now all she had was doubt. Because no matter what Ridge said, no matter how many times he denied it, she knew the look in his eyes the moment he pulled Brooke from that water. It wasn't just relief. It was love. Brooke tried to brush it off. She told reporters it was an accident. She told Taylor it meant nothing. She told herself she wasn't confused. But she was. Because that look Ridge gave her, that raw, unfiltered love, was the same look that had once burned into her soul. And it was back. Uninvited. Unstoppable. Nick, humiliated, furious, still clung to hope. He didn't care about Ridge. He didn't care about Taylor. He told Brooke, that fall, that rescue, it doesn't change what's real. It doesn't erase what we've had. You were going to say yes. But even as he said it, he saw the hesitation in her eyes. Not rejection. Not love. Just chaos. Because Brooke Logan was once again the woman caught between two impossible choices. On one side, Nick, the rogue sailor who had promised her a life of wild, untamed adventure. A man who had made mistakes, but never stopped loving her with total intensity. On the other, Ridge, the eternal soulmate, the man she had married more times than she could count, who could destroy her heart and rebuild it in the same breath. And watching it all, quietly, was Eric. Because this was no accident. Not entirely. Eric had known Nick was coming. He had heard about the ring. He had even encouraged Ridge to go to Capri, subtly, calmly, planting just enough fear to provoke action. Not because he wanted Ridge and Brooke back together, but because he wanted to see the truth surface. The real dynamics. The hidden loyalties. He had grown tired of watching everyone lie to themselves. Eric was playing the long game. He knew Taylor's heart couldn't survive another betrayal. He knew Brooke would never walk away clean from Ridge. He knew Nick was still desperate enough to stir the pot. So he let it all unfold. He sat back and watched, waiting for the truth to cut through the lies. And it did. Taylor began pulling away. Not with rage, with silence. Cold distance. She stopped returning Ridge's calls. She postponed the wedding. She packed a bag. Ridge, torn and spiraling, denied everything, but his actions betrayed him. Every time Brooke called, he answered. Every time she needed something, he showed up. He said he was just being protective after the fall. That the near-death experience had shaken them both. But Taylor saw it clearly. He was slipping. Back into old patterns. Back into Brooke. Brooke, meanwhile, was unraveling. She tried to be loyal to herself, to stay grounded. But she couldn't ignore the dreams, the what-ifs, the way Ridge's touch still lingered long after they dried off from that fateful swim. She avoided Nick. She avoided Ridge. She tried to focus on her work, her family. But she couldn't forget the sea, the cliff, the ring, the rescue. She was living inside a storm. And in that chaos, the past began knocking again. Memories resurfaced, moments with Ridge, moments with Nick. Betrayals. Forgiveness. Passion. Pain. Everything tangled together. And she had to make a decision. But the decision wasn't just about love. It was about identity. Who is Brooke Logan now? The woman who always chased love? Or the woman who finally claimed her own peace? The answer didn't come easily. Because while she wrestled with her heart, the men around her were still pushing. Nick refused to give up. He stayed in Capri, waiting, determined to have one final conversation. "You haven't said no," he reminded her. "And until you do, I'm still in this." Ridge flew back to LA early, trying to patch things with Taylor. But his heart wasn't fully in it. And Taylor knew it. She confronted him one night. "You saved her. You still love her. Just admit it." He didn't deny it. "Not this time." He said, "I'll always love her. But I love you too." And that was the end of it. Taylor took off the ring. Quiet. Resolute. "I won't be second to her again." Back in Capri, Brooke stood on the same cliff where everything had started. Alone this time. The sea roared beneath her. The ring Nick had offered sat in her palm. She threw it. Into the sea. She wasn't choosing either of them. Not today. Not yet. Because the greatest drama in Brooke Logan's life wasn't about who she loved. It was about what she'd finally do when she stopped trying to please them all and chose herself instead. But even as she walked away, one thing was certain. The war for her heart wasn't over. Not by a long shot. After Ridge pulled Brooke from the ocean, after the gasps and headlines and camera flashes, after everyone declared him a hero, something was off. Ridge Forrester wasn't himself. He stood upright, tried to smile, but his skin was pale, his hands trembled, and moments later, he collapsed. It wasn't the crash of waves this time. It was his body. Shutting down. Right there on the shore of Capri, with Brooke screaming his name and kneeling beside him. The ambulance came fast. The press cleared. Doctors rushed him into emergency care. Brooke followed every step, her hair still damp from the sea, panic written across her face. She didn't care how it looked. Taylor caught the next jet, ignoring pride and promises. Ridge was in danger, and that meant nothing else mattered. The diagnosis came quietly, delivered behind closed doors by a somber-faced specialist, early-stage liver failure. It wasn't a trauma injury. It wasn't dehydration or stress. This had been building for months, maybe years. Fatigue, Weight loss, dizziness. Ridge had ignored them all. Too busy managing family drama, design deadlines, romantic chaos. He'd brushed off the symptoms until his body refused to stay quiet any longer. Now he needed a transplant. Not tomorrow. Not next year. Soon. The family reeled. Eric tried to stay strong, but the reality shook even him. Steffi and Thomas went into immediate action mode, combing through donor databases, pulling every string. Hope reached out to her medical contacts. Brooke refused to leave Ridge's bedside. Taylor worked around the clock contacting specialists in Europe and the States. But time was not on their side. And then Thomas found it. Ridge's full medical file, half buried in his father's home office computer. Not the hospital version. The real one. The one Ridge had quietly updated weeks before Capri. The one that showed elevated liver enzymes. The one that revealed he knew something was wrong long before the collapse. He hadn't told anyone. Not Brooke. Not Taylor. Not even Eric. Thomas exploded. He knew. He knew and didn't say anything. But behind the rage was fear. Ridge wasn't just his father. He was the center of everything. The man who pulled everyone together, even when he was the one tearing things apart. Now Ridge was unconscious. Intubated. And two women who had spent years fighting each other were suddenly sitting on opposite ends of a sterile hospital waiting room, no longer as enemies, but as something stranger, co-defendants in a shared grief. Brooke watched him sleep through glass. The man who had saved her life was now clinging to his own. And for the first time in a long time, her feud with Taylor didn't matter. Because Ridge needed both of them. Not as rivals. As pillars. Taylor approached first, cautiously. "I know you hate me," she said, quietly, her eyes on Ridge. "But I can't do this without you." Brooke didn't blink. "Then we don't fight." Not now. They made a silent pact. Until Ridge woke up, there would be no war. But under the truce was something heavier. Old wounds reopened in silence. Regrets. The kind you only admit when time is running out. Both women had spent decades circling Ridge like a planet around a sun. Now, they were about to lose him. Donor matches were rare. The waiting list was long. But neither Brooke nor Taylor backed down. They took blood tests. Contacted friends. Pleaded with family. Katie and Donna called in favors. Steffi flew to New York to meet with a private research hospital. Thomas, driven by guilt and love, volunteered to donate if he was eligible. He wasn't. The clock kept ticking. Then came the worst update yet. Ridge had taken a turn. Internal bleeding. Pain. Fever. The medical team stabilized him, but the writing was on the wall. If a match wasn't found soon, they would lose him. Brooke broke down. Not in front of anyone. Alone in the hallway, hands over her mouth, shaking. Taylor found her there. Didn't say a word, just sat beside her. They didn't need to speak. Everything had already been said over decades of war. Meanwhile, Eric made a quiet move of his own. He contacted his lawyers. Updated the family trust. Began preparing for the worst. But part of him refused to believe this was how Ridge's story would end. Not like this. Then came a sliver of hope. A donor. Not a perfect match, but close enough. A man in Arizona. Deceased. Late 40s. Liver viable. Ridge was moved to transplant readiness immediately. The surgery was scheduled. The family held their breath. The night before the operation, Ridge woke up. Not fully. Just enough to open his eyes, squeeze a hand. Brooke was there. Taylor too. Both women looked at each other, unsure who should speak first. Ridge's voice was weak, but it came through. "You two didn't kill each other?" Brooke laughed through tears. Taylor smiled. "Not yet," she said. "But if you pull through, we might fight over who gets to push your wheelchair." Ridge smiled. Barely. But it was real. The surgery went ahead. Hours passed. And finally, the doctor stepped out. It was a success. He's stable. The liver took. The relief was overwhelming. Hugs, tears, whispered thank yous to the sky. For now, Ridge was alive. But the aftermath wasn't simple. Brooke and Taylor's truce lingered, fragile but still intact. Neither woman could deny what they'd felt in those dark hours. Not just fear, but love. And not just for Ridge. For the parts of themselves they'd lost in fighting each other. Ridge's recovery was slow. Grueling. He needed help, real help. Brooke and Taylor alternated shifts at the hospital. Brooke brought books and sarcasm. Taylor brought calm and perspective. Ridge, for once, listened. And he watched. He saw Brooke cry when she thought he was sleeping. He saw Taylor quietly check every machine, every dosage, every schedule. He saw two women who had once torn each other apart now caring for him together. And for the first time, Ridge couldn't choose. He didn't want to. He told them that. "I can't pretend to know what happens next," he said one night, voice rough but honest. "But I know I love you both. And I owe you my life." They didn't ask for a decision. Not anymore. Maybe they both knew that Ridge's illness had changed things permanently. This wasn't about picking sides. It was about surviving. But still, the triangle remained. Not fiery. Not romantic. Quiet. Tense. Undeniable. And now it was more than just a love story. It was about legacy. About family. About who Ridge would be if he made it out of this stronger than before. Because one thing was certain, the war between Brooke and Taylor may have been paused, but the emotions underneath it were still alive. The love, the pain, the history. Ridge was awake. But the triangle was far from over. It had simply evolved. And soon, the past would come knocking again. Not with jealousy, with consequences. Because near death changes people. And Ridge's second chance wouldn't just rewrite his future, it might tear everything else apart in the process.